Okay, so welcome to the last lesson in the second unit. Before we go into the real detailing and polishing of our landscape, we're going to start using a bit more color. So this lesson is going to focus on painting the main colors, or we'll talk about local colors and what those are as well, and materials. And we'll just still for now be using brushes. And then in the second part of this lesson, we'll start lighting a bit more, thinking about our light source and add some highlights and stuff. And as you can see, I've pulled up two color references because before I didn't need these. I was looking at the landscape references only, this one here. And now we're going to start thinking more about color and mood, so now we need to bring up the other references that we collected earlier in this class. So I'm going to go for this kind of color palette at the moment. I can still change it at the end if I don't like it, but I like this sort of color variation, and we're gonna pick from it. And you can see I've got one photo here that is very detailed, and then here I've got something blurry. And something that I didn't mention before, but which is pretty important, is that when you're looking up mood references or color references, you don't have to pick a landscape in a certain lighting condition. You can actually look at anything with color. It can be super abstract. It's absolutely fine. As long as the palette is beautiful and works, you can extract color from it. Or you can even choose which colors you extract. It's all up to you. So let's just jump in and start. And I'm just going to paint a bit on the foreground. And you've probably seen it by now, but I've got my color window up here. I haven't really been using it. I've been actually going here to the color picker, but I'm going to change that now. I'm actually going to start working with this color picker, and the reason that I do that is because here I can lock the value. It's a nice way of working. You can use other ways, obviously, like using color transfer modes, etc. But I like to work with full colors and not rely on blending modes and just control my color manually, kind of like in a traditional way. But only a lot easier, obviously. And so I've just set this to HSB, which is the hue, the saturation, and the brightness. And so now every time when I pick a value here, so I can see about where it is. And let's say I want to pick a value from here, I can also see where about it is. And that way I can compare them and sort of stick to my value range that I have, which I think is good right now. Or you can just manually move the sliders to whatever color you assume is there. So I'll just pick this this blue, and maybe I'll do a little bit of work on the background first. Just get a tiny bit of color in there because it's quite bland and boring at the moment. And you can already see that I'm putting a light source on the top of the image. Another thing that I could have done is done something like that. So put the light source at the bottom of the image. It's really up to you. This is going to affect obviously the lighting. And I'm just looking in the navigator which one I like the most, and I think I might actually go for this one because I kind of want this to be my first focal point, and then I want to lead the viewer up to this the top of this structure. And because this is light and bright, that's what you're going to look at first. You can see it in the thumbnail. That's what you look at first, and with this you look at the top structure first. So it's something you have to think about. What am I telling? What am I saying? And what do I want as an importance? I could also try a mix of both, but maybe that's going to attract a little bit too much attention. So let's see, which one should I go with? Okay, so I think I'm gonna go with this one after all, and the reason is because I'm gonna use local illumination here, and if I use this one, there's already a lot of illumination there, and so I'm just gonna take the advantage of the sky color to put a focus on my second focal point, and I'll bring in local illumination here to draw attention to it. And you'll see that develop as we go along. So let me just put a little bit of color variety. I'm just color picking from my mood references. You don't have to, you can play around with this sliders a little bit. Just try to be careful so that you maintain your values that you had before. Okay, so I think this is good. And I was talking about the color mode before. It's something that you can do as well. I could just use the color mode to color this, and as you can see, I'm not really touching the value right now. But personally, I like to work just with the normal blending mode and just sort of control the color manually. And I like to use a bit more gray tones, a little bit more desaturated as I go down, and a bit more saturated as I go up. Okay, and now let's apply the same to these. And normally what you'd normally do is that you'd make things in the background more desaturated than in the foreground. That's usually what happens in an atmosphere. Just merge these and pick that value. So I can just pick that value and then change the saturation or whatever settings, and then paint, and it is not affected. And you don't have to worry too much about having the super exact color. We're just trying to get a little bit of variation in there, like a sort of base, sort of foundation of basic colors. And we're not going to worry about the local color yet, which is the actual color of our object. We're looking more about underlaying colors. I think the background's a bit too saturated, so I'll just get rid of a bit of that green. Make it a bit cooler maybe. Okay. Okay, that's not bad. And now that we've actually started working in color, maybe you'll notice that it becomes slightly harder to see if your values are good. And to do that, we're going to add a layer that will actually turn the image back into black and white so that we can continue to see if our values are working. So let me just pick a gray color and fill a new empty layer with that and just set it to saturation. So that way we can just turn it on and off if we want to look if our values are still working, because that's quite important. And now, yeah, we can just continue painting a little bit more. Gonna put some slight variations in the sky maybe. And don't worry about the details right now. We're just mostly doing gradients and a little bit of texturing, because we don't use photo textures, and that will just add so much detail straight away. But it's just not really important right now. Just trying to get a sort of foundation there that we can work with. Okay. And now, as I said before, the second part would be to choose a light source and start applying that a bit too. And I think the light source is going to be up here. And in my my sketch that I had, you can see that I also applied a light source here. And maybe we can play with some volumetric light like I was doing before. But that's for later. So for now, let's just add a little bit of highlights. And I guess if the light source was here, obviously it would sort of follow this direction. Okay. So let me just pick this layer, and I'll pick one of the bright colors of the coral here, and maybe a different kind of brush, and just go in there and give it some highlights. Don't worry about the color too much. It's really not that important yet. It's all about the value right now and the underlying color. So, just to have something there. And again, we can just change some parameters here. And don't be afraid. Just, you can even do stuff randomly. We're trying to get color variety, so just move the slide around. As long as you stay in the grays, you can't really do that much wrong, because there's so many subtle grays everywhere in the world around us, and you can just play around with that. You can get some really nice natural looking colors. So I'm just really kind of randomly changing it around. The only thing that I'm really trying to keep in mind is that the light source is here. So this is sort of where light will hit. I guess if we're underneath the structure, we wouldn't see actually much from the top. It'd be pretty dark, actually, come to think of it. And you have to be careful with that so that you don't kill the scale somehow. Maybe here and there you'd see like a tiny little highlight. And then the foreground, I guess we can have a look there, what we can do. Just very basic. For now, I'll try to keep it quite dark, but maybe just put a slight little bit of texture in there. Okay, and maybe here, I feel like this needs a bit of texture. We're just kind of setting the foundation for our materials very roughly. Very, very roughly. And again, just play around with the colors. You can go a bit crazy if you want, Just try to explore different ideas and just get that richness in there. That's the most important part. Just get a rich variety that will then sort of tone back once we start applying our photo textures. And obviously always keep your values in mind, so don't worry about going back and seeing that you didn't mess things up. Okay. So I think that's pretty good for now. We're not going to go that much deeper into lighting, the actual, the real nice cinematic lighting that you're probably waiting for. We'll do that later in the detailing phase. Here we're more focusing on choosing an actual light source, and that's something that we couldn't see before. Now we just know, okay, the light's coming from up there and it's hitting the top of these structures. That's pretty clear now. In the thumbnail you can see it pretty well. And this also helps to define form, read form. So yeah, you can see that we're slowly getting to this. It looks a bit mushroomy still, but we're slowly getting to this kind of design language of these corals. And we'll add the other ideas later on. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this lesson. And after this, we're going into Unit 3, which is the final part actually. And obviously the detailing phase is actually the phase that takes the longest, because you're focusing on much more pixels, so to speak. So we'll split it up in a couple of different sections so that you can just nicely follow along. And the first will be painting detail, the first part. Then we'll talk about texture detailing. So then we're actually going to use photos, and that will drastically improve the level of detail in our image. And then at the end we'll apply the extra lighting effects. So yeah, let's move on to the next lesson.